Hello and welcome back to the Safeguarding Vulnerable Adults training course. During this lesson, we will look at why some vulnerable adults are exposed to instances of abuse and neglect. For most people, this seems to be an inconceivable and inexcusable way to treat people in need of care. Still, we'll explore how these circumstances can arise and the symptoms that can indicate a suspected case. First, we must understand what abuse or neglect means. According to Common English Dictionary definitions, the word safeguard means simply to protect something, and also to protect someone from harm, damage or personal loss. In terms of community care and social services in this country, the word has become the general term used to describe significant measures that are taken to ensure the upkeep of the health, well-being and human rights of vulnerable individuals. We will discuss existing legislations in more detail in a later lesson. Still, for guidance, the UK has the Care Act 2014 in place to provide a legal framework for protecting vulnerable adults, which assists local authorities in understanding their duties in this area. There are 6 primary principles in the Act. Protection. React appropriately when abuse is reported or suspected. Empowerment. Encourage people to make their own decisions. Accountability. Make all safeguarding roles and responsibilities clear. Prevention. Stop abuse by raising awareness. Proportionality. Assess any risks and situations reasonably. Partnerships. Work with other professionals and organisations to manage risks. It is important to remember that each of these principles is highlighted to not only provide protection for vulnerable adults, but also to respect their human rights and allow them to choose how they are supported. Forms of safeguarding should never descend to cases of a person being isolated unwillingly or having decisions constantly made for them, as it will then become a form of abuse in its own right. There are various ways in which a vulnerable adult can be exploited or abused. The most common examples of this include human trafficking. Individuals are recruited and transported to national or international locations where they are exploited for cheap labour and regarded as disposable resources. Domestic abuse. Individuals are subjected to continual physical abuse or threats to their well-being by a person known to them. This is often a family member or partner, but can also be a carer or friend. Modern slavery. Individuals are kept isolated from others and used purely by captors to work for little or no money, often forced to live in enclosed and unhealthy spaces. Systematic humiliation. Individuals are constantly derided and mocked for any differences, often in public environments. Aspects of human trafficking and modern slavery can be related to sex crimes, especially where the vulnerable adults affected are female. They can be coerced or threatened into enforced prostitution or other forms of sex work, which will be very much against their will or personal values. Young women can also be subjected to female genital mutilation, FGM, at these times. This is a procedure that is still practiced in some areas of Africa, Asia and the Middle East, but is a criminal act in the UK and other countries where authorities will actively safeguard against it. In addition to the earlier definition of a vulnerable adult, in this lesson there are likely to be specific and personal reasons why someone may be in serious need of external support. These could include such contributing factors as mental health problems, posing a risk to their own well-being and potentially other people, alcohol and drug-related issues, posing a risk to themselves and others with their actions and decision-making. Physical disabilities or injuries, being more at risk to threats of violence and easier to isolate from others. Homeless and destitute, being susceptible to emotional and physical harm or coercion. Old age, being more easily intimidated or manipulated. No matter their circumstance, background or values, everyone has the right to feel safe in their own surroundings. This means that they should be able to live without constantly having to fear the actions of others, being free from any acts of abuse, neglect, humiliation or exploitation. In realistic terms, most local authorities or carers cannot take on the full responsibility of safeguarding adults by themselves. This is why they must commit to supporting close contacts with the police, the National Health Service, NHS, and other key organisations in the country. With this spirit of safety and cooperation, local authorities are advised to comply with several directives regarding safeguarding adults. They must commit to making immediate inquiries if a vulnerable adult is believed to be at risk of abuse or neglect, opening an official inquiry to determine if rapid action is required to stop abuse or neglect and who will take responsibility for it, set up a Safeguarding Adults Board, SAB, for regional investigations and escalation, arrange for independent bodies to represent an adult who is the subject of the safeguarding inquiry, contact and cooperate with all relevant organisations in order to protect adults on a national basis. Training is crucial when it comes to the effective safeguarding of vulnerable adults. Without the proper experience or knowledge, it is possible that symptoms of abuse or neglect can be missed. It will also be likely that some signs may be misread or misunderstood, leading to unfounded accusations and reputational damage. A careful balance must be maintained when it comes to safeguarding to ensure people's safety and to limit unnecessary harm to any innocent parties affected by it. 3 primary teaching points need to be included with any safeguarding training, and they arise from 3 important questions. They are: what type of abuse is thought to be taking place? It is important to know if a person is being manipulated, placed under mental stress, or suffering physical violence in order to act accordingly. Why is the adult in a situation where they are at risk? Understanding why a person is in a vulnerable category can help decide how to deal with the issue. Which signs of abuse, neglect, or exploitation have been seen? Verification of abuse can arise from behaviour changes or physical signs, such as scratches, malnutrition, bruises or broken bones. Sudden loss of property or wealth should also be considered. The main purpose of those three questions and the thinking behind them is that they will lead to a greater understanding of the needs and circumstances of a vulnerable adult. In turn, this will lead to more finely judged decisions on how to proceed with cases of suspected abuse or mistreatment. Appropriate activities will then lead to either the prevention of abuse or the immediate stoppage of it. In addition to those questions during safeguard training, three more factors should be covered. These must include priority for taking action. If a person is thought to be in significant harm or danger to life, they must be removed from the situation as quickly as possible. Following lawful practices. During all procedures, the appropriate legislation and protocol should be complied with fully. Understanding an individual's need. Each case should be treated as unique, as should the requirements of the vulnerable adult affected by it. Whilst the well-being of a vulnerable adult at risk should always be the primary concern of any investigation or process regarding safeguarding, it is important to remember that laws and policies are in place to protect their interests at all levels. Imagine the emotional impact on a vulnerable adult if a beloved carer or a favourite family member was denied permission to help them, mainly due to unsubstantiated rumours and ineffectual safeguarding. Obviously, the emphasis on preventing abuse in the first place is just as important. It is important to remember that signs of abuse, neglect and exploitation can be hidden from investigations in several ways. Any training should also cover this aspect, including instances where vulnerable adults deny cases of abuse to investigators due to being afraid of repercussions from their abuser, having low self-esteem or no confidence, being from overseas and unfamiliar with their location or laws, being reluctant to cause any disruption to their lifestyle, feeling embarrassed or inadequate. That completes this first lesson, where we have explained the definition of vulnerable adults, circumstances in which they can be put at risk, and the importance of training in safeguarding methods. In the next lesson, we will focus on the existing UK laws and legislation regarding safeguarding adults. So stay with us and we'll see you soon.